Silence. Imagine this. For over 2,000 years, billions have bowed their heads before a name that history can't even confirm existed. The archives are silent. The eyewitnesses left no trace, no dates, no documents, just stories. Retold, revised, reprinted. Now, imagine everything you thought you knew about Jesus Christ was edited, constructed, orchestrated. My name is Moon Whispers, a theologian who stopped trusting the canon. I've opened forbidden manuscripts, spoken with heretics, listened to the silence in Roman catacombs, and traced the fingerprints of empires across sacred texts. And now, I'll show you something. You're listening to Moon Whispers History, and this is your first step into the dark. Subscribe if you're not afraid of history that smells like sulfur. And tell us in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it there? Because time is the key, and truth doesn't always want to be found. Let's start with a paradox. The name Jesus Christ is among the most recognized in human history. His image is familiar even to those who've never touched a Bible. His story is told in places where churches have never stood. He is, arguably, the most influential figure of the last 2,000 years. And yet, when you try to find him in history, he disappears. So here's the first question in our investigation, and it may sound outrageous, even offensive, but it's a legitimate one. Where do we even get the idea that Jesus existed? Not out of sarcasm, not out of disdain for belief, but with the honesty of a historian who asks not what we believe, but what we know. Any credible historian will tell you even the greatest names in history need evidence. Hannibal left battlefields, Caesar left writings, the Buddha left followers and preserved texts. But Jesus? We have no personal letters, no recorded trial, no confirmed objects linked to him, and, perhaps most telling, not a single contemporary witness outside the Christian movement who ever said, "I met this man, I saw him, I heard him preach." You might say, well, of course, it was the ancient world, things got lost. Sure, but we're not talking about some local mystic in the hills. We're talking about a man who, allegedly, was followed by thousands, was proclaimed the Messiah, was executed publicly by Rome, and, according to many, returned from the dead. Events like these tend to leave marks. But here's the problem. The marks we do find are blurry, conflicting, or appear decades later, and often in sources that themselves demand scrutiny. Which brings us to the central dilemma. The historical Jesus and the biblical Jesus are not the same person. Tradition says Jesus lived because the faith survived. History asks, do we have anything besides faith? There's a detail in the search for the historical Jesus that raises more questions than answers. Our earliest written source about him comes from a man who never met him. We're talking about Paul. Yes, that Paul, the man who wrote most of the New Testament, the man who shaped key doctrines of Christianity, salvation by faith, original sin, resurrection as divine proof. And yet, Paul was not one of Jesus' disciples. He never walked the roads of Galilee. He wasn't at the Last Supper. He didn't stand at the cross. In fact, Paul enters the story after Jesus is already dead, as a fierce persecutor of early Christians. Only after a mysterious vision on the road to Damascus does he convert and become an apostle. That means everything Paul knew about Jesus, he learned from a voice in his head. And here's the twist. Paul's letters, written in the 50s and 60s CE, are the oldest Christian writings we have. They predate the Gospels. They predate the book of Acts. They are the foundation. And yet, in these letters, Paul never mentions Mary or Joseph, says nothing about Bethlehem, includes no miracles, gives no description of Jesus' appearance, and never quotes a single parable. Paul's Jesus is not the man from Nazareth. He is a celestial figure crucified for our sins and resurrected, all in vague mystical terms. This is not the gospel Jesus. It's something else entirely. Some say a theological construct. Others, a mythic archetype. Isn't it strange that the man who claimed the deepest spiritual connection to Jesus says virtually nothing about his earthly life? Maybe that's because, for Paul, Jesus wasn't a teacher you could meet. He was a cosmic revelation. But if even Paul never knew the earthly Jesus, then who wrote the stories we call the Gospels? In the Christian imagination, the Gospels are often seen as live coverage, eyewitness reports, first-hand memories from disciples with front-row seats, as if Matthew was scribbling in a notepad during the Sermon on the Mount, as if Luke interviewed Mary over a cup of tea, as if each word is an unfiltered historical document. It's a beautiful idea, but it's not true. The reality? Not a single one of the 4 canonical Gospels was written by the person whose name it bears. None were signed like authentic historical documents, and none were written during Jesus' lifetime. Even the earliest, the Gospel of Mark, appeared around 70 CE, some 4 decades after the crucifixion. Imagine trying to write a biography of someone from 1985, without video, without social media, relying only on rumors and stories passed along campfires. Now, imagine 4 such biographies, and each of them disagrees on the key details. That's what we're dealing with. Mark, the source behind the stories. When scholars look at the Gospels, one puzzle immediately stands out. Why are 3 of them so similar? Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the synoptic Gospels, not only tell the same stories, they often do it word for word in the same order. That's no accident. That's a trail. Mark is the shortest, simplest, and earliest. It reads like a rough script, abrupt, fast-paced, with raw emotion. Most scholars agree. Matthew and Luke copied Mark. Not just themes. They lifted whole paragraphs, almost verbatim. This is first-century copy-paste. So, who was Mark? Tradition claims he was Peter's translator, but early manuscripts bear no signature, no note of authorship. The name Mark was added decades later, retroactively. And here's the twist. Mark's gospel ends in silence, the ending that was rewritten. In the oldest manuscripts, Mark ends at chapter 16, verse 8. Women visit the tomb. It's empty. They run away in fear. And that's it. No resurrected Jesus. No final message. No go and preach to all nations. Later, editors felt uneasy, so they added a dozen more verses, a proper resurrection scene, some divine appearances, and a commandment or 2. It was a retcon, the first known editorial patch in gospel history. If Mark didn't witness Jesus and didn't even finish his story, and Matthew and Luke simply adapted it with their own agendas, then how historical are these biographies? If Matthew, Mark, and Luke tell versions of the same plot, then the Gospel of John reads like it was written on a different planet, different tone, different language, and most of all, a different Jesus. This is not the wandering preacher from Nazareth. This is the Logos, the Word of God that existed before time. It's not biography. It's theology in motion, from earth to ether, In the Synoptics, Jesus teaches in parables. He eats, sleeps, weeps, heals. He's physical, emotional, present. In John, he speaks only in symbols. I am the bread of life. I am the door. I am the light of the world. I and the Father are one. There are no parables, no exorcisms, few human touches. Jesus in John is less revolutionary prophet, more divine riddle in human skin. Philosophy in the flesh. John's text is steeped in philosophical metaphors. Neoplatonism, divine light and eternal forms. Gnosticism, hidden knowledge and dualism between spirit and flesh. Hellenistic ideas, the Logos as universal reason. This isn't the voice of a Galilean fisherman. This is the pen of a mystic steeped in Greek thought. Written for a new era. While Mark was written around 70 CE and Matthew and Luke between 80-90 CE, John arrives much later, between 95-110 CE. The temple in Jerusalem is gone. The Christian community is splitting from Judaism. There's a new need, not just a teacher, but a cosmic Christ. John doesn't record history. He offers faith as reality. His Jesus isn't to be discovered. He is to be believed in. Q, the phantom source. Everyone uses, but no one seen. There's something strange about Matthew and Luke. They share entire sayings of Jesus, almost word for word, sayings that don't appear in Mark. Where did they get them? The Q hypothesis. To solve this, 19th century scholars proposed a ghostly solution, a lost source, never seen, never named, but absolutely essential. They called it Q, short for the German Quell, meaning source. Q, they argued, was an early sayings collection. No miracles, no stories, just Jesus' words. Matthew and Luke then used both Mark and Q to compose their Gospels, a mashup of action and speech. The invisible document Q has left no manuscripts, no fragments, no author, no church father mentions it, no ancient historian records it, and yet it explains too much to ignore. Why it matters. If Q existed, it paints a very different picture of early Christianity, a movement obsessed not with the death of Jesus, but with his teachings, a voice, not a sacrifice, a teacher, not a divine martyr. Q suggests that the earliest Christians followed a sage, not yet a savior. The Gospels are not just spiritual texts. They're targeted messaging. Matthew wrote for Jews. Jesus is the new Moses, fulfilling the law. Luke wrote for Greeks. Jesus is a moral philosopher, a universal humanist. Mark wrote for persecuted believers. Jesus as the suffering Messiah. John wrote for mystics. Jesus as the cosmic Word made flesh. One Jesus, 4 portraits, each shaped by audience expectations and theology. This isn't journalism, it's narrative engineering. Manuscript surgery, edits, additions, and silent erasures. We don't have the originals. We have copies of copies, filled with changes. Scribes made intentional edits. He got angry. He showed compassion. Extra resurrection scenes added, like Mark's new ending, contradictions smoothed out, dangerous verses quietly removed after the Council of Nicaea, 325 CE. The church moved to standardized doctrine, and the texts followed suit. Truth that survives redaction is no longer raw truth. It's theology with editorial approval. The silent witnesses. Why did no one else write about Jesus? According to the Gospels, Jesus moved crowds. He healed, debated, performed public miracles. He had thousands of followers, and yet no first-hand accounts, not from women who followed him, children he blessed Roman officials who judged him, common people who heard him. Where are the women's voices? The Gospels feature women, but no writings from them survive. Mary Magdalene, the first to see the risen Christ, leaves us no words. We only hear about her. Where are the children? Jesus welcomed the little ones, but the little ones grew up. Where are their memories? Where are the Romans? Pilate judged him. Soldiers mocked him. Yet Rome's detailed bureaucracy has no record of Jesus, no trial transcript, no execution order, nothing. Where are the ordinary people? A man who fed thousands, walked across villages, stirred religious authorities, and yet no commoner's letter, no diary, no graffiti, no whisper survives. Why? The silence speaks. Were such writings lost? Or were they destroyed? Or did they never exist? When truth leaves no trace, it may not be truth. It may be invention. If the Gospels are edited theology and the crowds leave no trace, who were these so-called apostles? The men we're told knew Jesus personally, but who left no verifiable biography, no death date, no written legacy. Imagine a group of 12 men hailed as the closest to the Messiah, their names carved into cathedrals, their lives celebrated in sermons. They are called the foundation of the church. Now imagine we know less about most of them than we do about second-tier characters in The Lord of the Rings. No confirmed birth dates, no confirmed death dates, no verifiable biographies. Most of them are ghosts, briefly named, then forgotten. And even those who do appear more often, their stories are riddled with contradictions and post-facto myth-making. A list. No one agrees. On first problem, there's no consistent list of the 12 apostles. Matthew, Mark, Luke, Acts, they all differ. Names appear, disappear, shift. Even Paul, who calls himself an apostle, never uses the list. In fact, he seems to follow a different concept entirely. Was there ever an official 12? Or was the idea of 12 apostles invented later for symmetry and symbolism? Peter, the rock on shifting sands. Peter, the first among equals. According to the Gospels, Jesus says, "Upon this rock I will build my church." And yet, in Acts, Peter is the bold leader. In Paul's letters, he's almost irrelevant. In Mark, he constantly misunderstands Jesus. In John, he wavers between loyalty and betrayal. And the biggest issue? There's no solid historical evidence that Peter was ever in Rome, let alone that he was crucified upside down there. His martyrdom is a legend, a beautiful one, but built on silence, not sources. Paul, the apostle who skipped the Gospels. Paul never met Jesus in life. He wasn't at the Last Supper. He didn't see the miracles. And yet, his letters are the oldest texts in the New Testament. And his theology, salvation through faith, death, and resurrection, shaped Christianity more than anyone else. Paul didn't follow Jesus. Paul reinvented him. And strangely, Paul rarely quotes Jesus. He says almost nothing about his life. For Paul, Jesus is a mystical figure, a divine experience, not a rabbi. The others? Blank pages, try finding concrete details about Bartholomew Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, James, son of Alphaeus Thomas, beyond legends of India. You'll mostly find contradictory apocrypha. Sparse mentions invented martyrdoms, disputes across Orthodox, Catholic, Coptic, and other traditions. These aren't biographies. They're back-filled legends to give weight to names. Apostleship as a power. Moved by the 2nd century, apostle became a title of authority. So, who got to be one? Only eyewitnesses? Only the called? Or whoever the church said? The list of apostles was crafted to establish, we descend from the apostles. We hold the truth. You obey us. Apostles versus Paul. The conflict you're not supposed to notice. In Galatians, Paul publicly rebukes Peter, calls him a hypocrite, says he wasn't walking in line with the truth. This isn't minor drama. This is a theological civil war. Paul, mystical, universal Christianity for Gentiles. Peter, traditional, law-based Christianity for Jews. The New Testament smooths it over. Paul wins. The others become background characters. No apostle's tomb is confirmed, no verified artifacts, no letters, no personal writings, only later church tradition, pious stories, fabricated martyrdoms centuries after the fact. What does this mean? Maybe the first apostles were real, but not that important early on. Maybe their identities were reconstructed to serve theology. Maybe apostle wasn't a status. It was a function to carry the message. If the apostles are blank figures and their authority a posthumous invention, then who truly gave us the image of Jesus? And how did that image transform so drastically within one generation? In the Roman world of the first century, the title God wasn't exactly rare. Every emperor from Augustus to Caligula claimed some form of divinity. Deities were like Hollywood stars. The powerful were always divine. Now picture this. Into this world steps a wandering Jewish preacher, executed like a criminal, and within a few decades, he's worshipped as the incarnation of God himself. How did that happen? First of all, Jesus never called himself God. In the Synoptic Gospels, Mark, Matthew, Luke, he avoids direct declarations. He calls himself Son of Man, speaks in parables, always pointing to the Father. But in the Gospel of John, written later, Jesus declares, I and the Father are one. Before Abraham was, I am. That's not biography. That's theology. This is Jesus rewritten for a new era, an age where faith needed more than a teacher, it needed an embodied God. The real question isn't who Jesus was, it's who he was made to be. The earliest texts of the New Testament are not the Gospels, but Paul's letters. And Paul is the first to speak of Jesus not as a prophet, but as a cosmic Christ. Through him, all things were made. He is the image of the invisible God. In him dwells the fullness of the deity in bodily form. Paul isn't interested in Jesus' earthly life. What matters is the revelation, the crucifixion, the resurrection. A God who dies and is glorified. Paul never met Jesus in the flesh, but he was the first to see God in him, mystically. At first, he was a rabbi, then a prophet, then a Messiah, then the Son of God, the Christ, the Lord, the Logos, the Lamb, the Word made flesh. The further from Jesus in time, the higher his status climbs. The Gospels are not snapshots. They are paintings, made in different centuries, with different brushes. In 325 CE, something crucial happens, the Council of Nicaea. The persecuted church becomes imperial, and empires don't like ambiguity, they need doctrine. At Nicaea, the church officially declares Jesus is God. He is of one essence with the Father. Disagreeing is heresy. Thus was born the doctrine of the Trinity, and Jesus was finalized as the God-man. But what does history say? Jewish tradition had many messiahs, but none were gods. No Roman historian from the first century describes Jesus as divine. No contemporary account sees him as supernatural. Everything we have comes from within the church, written decades later. History is silent. Theology shouts. Why turn Jesus into a god? To win against rivals. A divine Jesus outranks any prophet. To unify believers, faith in God cements a community. To control the message, only the church knows the real God. It was a brilliant strategy. Divinity as centralization. If Jesus became God by conciliar decision, what did the church look like before that? Who led it? What did they believe? And what truths were erased? The moment Christianity gained power, it lost something else: unity. Ironically, as the faith in Jesus turned into an institution, it became clear there was no such thing as the church. There were dozens of communities, hundreds of teachings, and thousands of interpretations. They prayed differently, believed different things. Each called itself true. Each believed it alone held the truth. This raised a new question. Who gets to decide which version is correct? And who has the authority to label others as heretics? In the first few centuries, there was no Catholic Church as we know it. There was a mosaic. Johannine Christians, shaped by the gospel of John Paulinists, devoted to Paul's mystical vision, Gnostics, believers in hidden knowledge about the true Christarians, who saw Jesus as created by God, but not equal to him, Jewish Christians, who didn't believe Jesus was divine at all. It wasn't one faith. It was a theological marketplace. Who came out on top? The group that canonized their version first. The group with imperial backing. The one that organized councils. The church that won wasn't the oldest. It was the one that best institutionalized itself. The word heresy comes from the Greek heresis, which simply meant choice or school of thought. At first, it wasn't an insult, but soon heretic became a weapon, not just a dissenter, but a threat to unity. A mechanism of exclusion emerged. This isn't apostolic. This distorts the truth. This is dangerous. And so the purging began. Books were burned. Meetings were banned. Teachers were persecuted. References erased. A massive part of early Christianity was deliberately erased. Hundreds of texts were excluded from the canon or condemned as fake gospels. Among them, the Gospel of Thomas, sayings of Jesus without miracles or resurrection. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene, where Mary is a close disciple, not a prostitute. The Gospel of Judas, where Judas isn't a traitor, but the chosen one. These writings were inconvenient. They didn't fit orthodoxy. They weren't under church control. So they vanished, and those that remained were edited. A council wasn't a prayer meeting. It was a political battlefield. At Nicaea, 325, Constantinople, 381, Ephesus, 431, Chalcedon, 451, the question wasn't, what is true? It was, who will win? The stakes. Was Jesus divine from birth? Did he have one nature or two? Was Mary mother of God or mother of Christ? The answers determined who stayed in the church and who got cast out. We don't know how much was lost. We only see shadows, a few dozen canonical texts, and hints of hundreds more we'll never read. But what if those so-called heresies held pieces of truth? Not dogma, not politics, but raw, uncensored faith. What if the winner wasn't truth, but structure? If early Christianity was shaped by those who won the battle, what would the faith look like if other versions, Thomas, Mary, Judas, had formed the foundation of the religion? What if the New Testament disappeared and all that remained were the Gospels of Thomas, Judas, and Mary? What kind of Jesus would we believe in then? Maybe the most heretical texts aren't fabrications, but alternative lenses, ones through which we see not the familiar Messiah, but someone entirely different, a mystic, a teacher, a philosopher of inner truth. The Gospel of Thomas contains no story of birth, no baptism, no crucifixion, no resurrection. Just 114 sayings attributed to Jesus. The kingdom is inside you. Let the one who seeks keep seeking until he finds. Whoever knows himself will know the all. This Jesus doesn't save through blood. He guides through insight. There are no churches here, no rituals, no clergy, just gnosis, direct, personal understanding, which is exactly why this text was banned, burned, and buried, because it bypasses institutional control. The Gospel of Mary turned silence into voice. Mary Magdalene, usually a background figure, is the central interpreter of Jesus' message. She receives revelations. She understands better than the apostles. Peter asks, "Did the Lord really speak with a woman and not with us?" This isn't just a gospel. It's a threat to patriarchy. Had this text been canonized, the history of women in Christianity would be unrecognizable. The Gospel of Judas redefines betrayal. Judas doesn't act against Jesus, he fulfills his mission. "You will sacrifice the man who clothes me," Jesus tells him. Here, Jesus is not the body. He's a divine essence trapped in flesh. Judas, far from being a villain, is the one who helps release him. It's a Gnostic inversion. The material world is prison, and the traitor is the liberator. But the church didn't need nuance. It needed blame. These so-called apocryphal gospels share something vital. They reject suffering as redemptive. Jesus is a guide, not a martyr. Knowledge is prized over blind belief. Personal experience trumps ritual. They don't deny Jesus. They reframe him. This is a Christianity without temples, without hierarchy, without submission. And that made them dangerous. They didn't support ecclesiastical power. They undermined authority. So they were outlawed, marginalized, erased, not just excluded from the canon, but from reality itself. What remains are glimpses, fragments of a lost faith, a faith with different questions and maybe different answers. If we dare to look at Jesus beyond the official version, then who is he really? And what could salvation mean without crucifixion? What if Jesus was invented? Then who created him? This isn't a skeptic's provocation. It's a historian's question. Even fictional characters have origins, sources, archetypes. And here begins a fascinating journey into the world of myth, symbol, and recurring narratives. Let's imagine Jesus never existed, but the ideas he embodied predated him, dying and resurrecting gods, saviors, born of virgins. According to the theory of the mythical Jesus, these figures may have merged into one, familiar, divine, and designed to inspire. This idea is championed by so-called mythicists, scholars and writers who argue that Jesus was not a historical person, but a religious archetype. Among them, Richard Carrier, David Fitzgerald, Earl Doherty, Tom Harper. Their claim, Christianity arose not from biography, but theology, not from Jesus' life, but from the need for a Savior. Richard Carrier, in on the historicity of Jesus, uses probability and historical method to argue that Jesus likely didn't exist, giving odds of 1 in 3. Fitzgerald, in Nailed and Jesus, Mything in Action, lists arguments ranging from the absence of contemporary sources to clear mythic parallels. Now the fascinating part, those parallels. Horus, Egypt, born of the virgin Isis. His father Osiris was killed and resurrected. Horus battles Set, the dark forest. There are scenes of baptism, 12 disciples, miracles. Strikingly familiar, Mithras, Persia, Rome. Born of a rock or a virgin, resurrects. Dines with followers. Celebrated on December 25th, shepherds witness his birth. Mithraism was popular in Rome a century before Jesus. Dionysus, Greece. Son of a god and mortal woman, resurrected, turns water into wine. Wandering teacher who defies norms, holds communal feasts. Salvation through ritual. These are not direct copies, but cultural echoes. The Roman world was saturated with stories of gods who die and return. Universal symbols, light, sacrifice, blood, humble birth, battle with darkness, were everywhere. Mythicists argue Jesus was not unique. He was a synthesis, an archetype reflecting fear of death, hope for salvation, and political hunger for a moral leader. And if Jesus was an archetype, then his creation was not deception, but response, a collective answer to collapse. After defeat by Rome and destruction of the temple, the Jewish world searched for meaning, a Messiah, a prophet, an idea to heal. That idea could take form in texts, in rituals, in stories. That's why the earliest Christian records are not biographies, but hymns, not stories, but faith declarations. Paul never quotes Jesus' teachings. He proclaims that Christ rose. Paul is the first to turn Jesus into an idea, not a man, but a figure, which brings us to the essential question. If Jesus never existed, what do we have? A vast global religion built not on fact, but need, a faith that inspires billions, even if its center is only an archetype. And here lies the paradox. Christianity may still be true, even if its founder was invented, because its truth lies not in historical accuracy, but in transformative power. That's why this topic is so explosive. If Jesus is a legend, the church loses its monopoly on interpretation. Each believer becomes their own theologian, and that's terrifying, but also powerful, because myths, more than facts, can change the world. So here's the final question we leave you with. But if he never existed, who changed the world? And this is just the beginning. Next, we go even deeper. In the upcoming episode, Operation Messiah, was Jesus a political threat? We'll explore whether Jesus was a rebel leader, a covert operative, or a convenient messianic project engineered by the old elite. Stay with us. The most intriguing part is yet to come.